Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and participants, welcome to the United Nations Development Programme UNDP's Crisis Bureau and Climate Hub organized event at COP29, Harnessing Climate Solutions for People on the Move. We're here at COP29 in person, thank you for joining us, and live online right now at the Interagency Standing Committee IASC's COP29 Resilience and Humanitarian Hub. Thank you very much, OCHA and UN family, for coming together and joining us today. IASC is the primary UN global coordination mechanism, which we UNDP are proudly part of. They bring together UN and non-UN humanitarian actors to better prepare and respond to the humanitarian crisis. Today, I am here, Eri Yamasumi, Policy Specialist for Climate and Security Risk at UNDP, and I have the honor to guiding you through today's event. We're very excited to have brought together a remarkable group of people and leaders, experts who will share with you insights on this topic of climate change-induced forced displacement and people on the move. We all know that climate change is a risk multiplier and conflicts remain at their highest levels since World War II. Now the climate change continues to outpace this conflict as being the leading driver of displacement. Now, today, millions of people are being displaced due to climate impacts, such as rising sea levels, droughts, floods, extreme weather events. We all know it. So the aim is that we would look at this alarming trend and growing concern of the humanitarian and global security and development challenge that we are facing today. Our session begins with opening remarks from someone who leads a team of brilliant professionals, including my team, who is at the forefront of shaping global policy and partnerships for climate change. Please join me in welcoming the Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Director for Bureau of Policy and Program Support, Marcos Neto.
Thank you, Erin. Distinguished panelists, it's a pleasure to be here. Excellencies, thanks OCHA and all of UN friends for hosting us here. Now, the statistics are sobering. Climate-related disasters such as floods, hurricanes, droughts, and rising sea levels have displaced 20 million people over the past decade. This means millions of families lose their homes, livelihoods, and often their hope and stability for years to come. If we continue on this trajectory, experts have said that by 2050, over 200 million people to 1.2 billion people worldwide could be affected by climate displacement. Now, those are big numbers, but more important than that, behind each number is a family. A farmer in sub-Saharan Africa watching his land dies of drought. A family in Bangladesh seeing their home swallowed by rising tides. Or communities in the Pacific Islands literally making sure they have a country left. The complexity of climate displacement demands an integrated response. The United Nations Development Programme is committed to address this crisis by leveraging synergies between climate action and sustainable development. First, we must prioritize climate resilience. Investments in green infrastructure, sustainable water management, and climate-smart agriculture not only mitigated displacement risks, but also foster economic opportunity and regional stability. By empowering communities with adaptive tools and knowledge, we address root causes and build defenses against climate impacts. Across our portfolio, UNDP has supported more than 69 countries with adaptation projects focused on solutions that build resilience in critical sectors like food security, water resources, and early warning systems. Through partnerships with local communities and governments, we continue to integrate those solutions in long-term national adaptation plans, reinforcing the adaptive capacity of vulnerable populations to withstand climate impacts and safeguard livelihoods. Second, harness renewable energy is crucial. transitioning to sustainable energy sources like decentralized solar and wind not only reduces emissions but creates economic opportunities, enhancing community resilience, energy access, foster development, improving livelihoods and education outcomes. For UNDP, the energy transition supports both a greener planet and a more equitable world. Third, holistic urban and rural planning. The social protect systems are essential. As urban areas grow, climate-displaced population will gravitate towards cities. We must prepare cities and territories to welcome and integrate these populations with affordable housing, green spaces, and equitable services. Planning for migration proactively turns a potential crisis into an opportunity for sustainable, inclusive urban and rural growth. UNDP is working with many cities and territories to develop strategies that promote social inclusion and environmental resilience, ensuring that all residents, old and new, urban and rural, can thrive. However, despite all of those efforts, some displacement is inevitable. When climate disasters force people to move, international cooperation and human rights-based approaches become paramount. Those displaced must have legal protection, access to service, and pathways to rebuild with dignity. This requires new frameworks that address the unique plight of climate-displaced individuals. UNDP works with governments and communities to protect rights and support recovery and rebuilding efforts. While UNDP continues to address displacement challenges on the ground, a significant obstacle remains in scaling these efforts, and that's adaptation finance gap, which I hope will be discussed, has already been discussed a lot in this COP. With current international public adaptation finance flows covering only a fraction of what is needed, innovative approaches and increasing financing are crucial. UNDP strongly supports the call for all climate finance to meet the Glasgow commitment to double adaptation finance by 2025, ensuring vulnerable communities, especially those impacted by displacement, receive the necessary support. Finally, local communities must be at the heart of any solution. Indigenous knowledge, grassroots initiatives, and the lived experience of those on the front lines are crucial. Our role is to amplify their voices, support their work, and include them in participatory processes, leading to inclusive decision-making. While the challenges of climate-induced displacement is daunting, it offers a chance to reimagine a future where climate action and development go hand in hand. By breaking silos, embracing innovation, and acting with urgency and compassion, we can protect both people and planet. UNDP, with our humanitarian and peace partners, are committed to support countries and communities in this endeavor. The time to act is now. Together, we can ensure no one is left behind and that displaced person and their host communities can build, thrive, and rebuild their lives. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcos, for really shedding the light on the interplay that is very complex between the climate change, displacement, and different parts of security and peace-building efforts. Now, here I would like to now welcome a keynote speaker, Mr. Yusuf Samatar, Director General of Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Somalia. Welcome.
Thank you, Erin. Distinguished delegates and esteemed partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's indeed a great honor to join you today as we address one of the most urgent challenges of our time, climate-induced displacement. My deepest gratitude to the organizers of this event as we unite in sharing our mission of turning insight into transformative action. Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's a present reality reshaping lives, destabilizing livelihoods, and uprooting millions of people from their homes. Its effect reverberates globally, but for countries like Somalia, these impacts are particularly profound. In Somalia, climate change manifests as recurrent droughts, devastating floods, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events. This phenomenon has displaced over 2.3 million people just last year, deepening food insecurity and overwhelming already fragile socioeconomic systems. Climate shocks exacerbate pre-existing vulnerabilities such as conflicts and poverty, perpetuating a cycle of displacement and hardship. Unfortunately, Somalia's reality is mirrored globally. As the previous speaker has stated, projections estimate that up to 1.2 billion people could face displacement by climate impact by 2050. This stark figure is not just a humanitarian crisis, it is a call for global solidarity and decisive action. Recognizing the magnitude of this crisis, Somalia has taken bold steps to address climate-induced displacement. A cornerstone of our efforts has been the establishment of the National Commission for Refugees and Displacement, mandated to oversee displacement-related matters. In parallel, Somalia has embraced a leadership role in global climate actions. As a co-convener of the Global Refugee Forum multi-stakeholder pledge on climate action, we are committed to fostering integrated solutions that bridge humanitarian, development, and peace-building efforts. This pledge reflects our belief that addressing displacement requires proactive, sustainable strategies that align with both with local priorities as well as international frameworks. At this COP, at COP29, we have endorsed the climate security mechanism, reaffirming our dedication to safeguarding communities from climate-related risks. Somalia has also played a key role in initiatives such as the Kampala Declaration on Migration, Environment, and Climate Change, and also creation and validation of its plan of action. Tackling climate-induced displacement requires more than addressing symptoms. It demands addressing the root causes and building resilience. Allow me now to highlight some of the initiatives Somalia has taken in addressing this matter. 1. Data-driven predictive analysis and early warning systems. Leveraging technology is key to anticipating and mitigating displacement risks. Somalia, in partnership with regional and global stakeholders, is enhancing its data systems to better predict displacement hotspots and respond swiftly to emerging climate events. Inclusive risk governance. Effective strategies require inclusive governance structures that empower communities and ensure coordination across all stakeholders. Our National Adaptation Plan underscores locally led adaptation as a cornerstone of resilience, emphasizing initiatives that are driven by communities most affected by climate shocks. Number 3, localized adaptation initiatives. Across Somalia, community-based projects such as water conservation and reforestation are yielding tangible results. These initiatives are reducing displacement pressures, improving food security, and demonstrating the transformative power of locally led initiatives. Turning solutions into action requires substantial investment in climate and development financing. However, accessibility remains a barrier for countries like Somalia, where the need is most urgent. To address this, Somalia's National Adaptation Plan includes a bankable concept note highlighting the integration of climate mobility into national and international policies. This ensures the climate finance directly supports displaced population while addressing underlying vulnerabilities. Global financing mechanism must align with local priorities to ensure resources reach the communities where they have the greatest impact. We urge international stakeholders to streamline financing processes and promote equitable resource distribution. Distinguished participants, climate-induced displacement is one of the defining challenges of our era. But within these challenges lies an opportunity to reimagine systems, champion justice, and ensure equity for all. Somalia is committed to this journey. not just as a nation in need, but as a partner in shaping solutions and that transcend borders. We envision a future where displacement is not a marker of despair, but a rallying call for resilience. Together, let us act decisively and with urgency. Let us harness climate solutions to transform displacement into opportunity and vulnerability into strength. I thank you all.
Thank you very much for this amazing remarks, because it does show that sometimes where the climate change is impacted, that's where the innovative solutions happen as well, and that's where the answers we look for might be. Next up, we would want to invite you, Dr. Banak Joshua Daywal, Director General of Disaster Management, South Sudan, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. Welcome.
Thank you, Eric, for the invitation, and dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to share with you views on harnessing climate solution for the people on the move. First, let me convey to you bad news. The bad news is that South Sudan has been on the move. The people of South Sudan, almost half of them, have been on the move for the last 4 to 5 years. So that's the bad news. But I will tell you the good news at last. So when I saw the topic of the discussion today, so I said that's my topic, because I was born in conflict, and up to now as we speak, I'm partially also in the conflict. So I won't have written notes, because if I tend to write, maybe I will make mistakes. So better I speak overhead. So the reason why we have been on the move for the last 4 to 5 years, some of you maybe were not born by then. In 1955, South Sudan itself went into war for 17 years, the result of which 2.5 million people were displaced from Sudan. And then we had a respite of peace, relative peace in the whole Sudan in 1972 until 1983. In 1983, we went back to war, Sudan itself, for 22 years. And then in 2005, we had also peace. In 2011, South Sudan now, we took independence from Sudan. We became South Sudan government. After 5 years from independence, we went into war again. So if you sum all these years together, you will find that what I said, almost 4 to 5 years, we have been on the move. Before we come into the climate change impact, when I was a child, when I was told that there's a fight between South Sudan and North Sudan, I didn't know the reason, because I was not qualified to know the reason. What I was qualified of is to run away with my cattle and my sheep and my goats and my parents. That's what I knew. But as I went to high school, I knew that the reason of the movement and fighting was not climate change by then. Although, of course, I was ignorant about climate change also. What I knew is that there were people fighting. And why they were fighting, I was told that because of the resources and marginalization. So that's the reason of fighting. It means that bad governance. So one of the reasons why people fight, or people on the move, is the violence and conflict, and the reason is bad governance. So that's the one. Then I began to understand a little bit that there's something called heat wave in our geography, in our schools. And they say heat wave can increase sea level, and sea level, when you go to the ocean, by those days we don't know what is ocean. We knew only rivers, because we have the longest river in the world, the River Nile. So it has no ice, it has no snow. So we're asking, so what is that ice that is melting and then rising sea temperature? We were told it's some miles away, it's Indian Ocean, something like that. And then I also began to know that also natural disasters like flood and drought could also push people on the move. Also economic hardship. I'm one of the people who also migrated from Sudan to Europe or to Australia because of combined conflict and economic hardship and perhaps climate change by then. So, which one caused the other one? Is it the movement caused climate change or the climate change caused the movement? We all know, and I hope our experts, the panelists, will answer this. I think both contribute into each other. Why? Because the example is this. When I was a child, I was moving with my uncles and parents in the bush. When we are pushed away from our home, we cut trees. So we caught desertification. I think conflict and movement, they also contribute to the climate change. That is my answer. You can say no, because you are expert in this field. And the other way, now when we come to the drought and flood, South Sudan for the last 5 years, we have been living in flood. The most severe flooding ever. I was told that in 1963, we had similar flooding, where the river level in the Nile went up to 16.5. But the last 5 years, in 2019, the river level went up to 18.5, which means maybe the rising sea level, what the experts are talking about, it could be true. Now I believe it. Again, the growth of the population, we depend on oil. South Sudan entirely depend on oil. So urbanization and development are also causes of movement. When our leaders, when the elite don't care about people, but care about money, this is what happened. People will be moved away from their land, regardless of their choice, because they want oil exploration. We want to build dams, we want to build big roads, but we don't care about the community participation. So I think we will be on the move unless we change our attitude. And the attitude to change is to look at the money. Money is good because we couldn't have reached Azerbaijan, Baku without money. But again, you don't get money at the expense of the poor people. You make other people poor. That means that the causes of the movement, we all know, and it's the making of the human being. It's not the making of the, what we don't know is called climate change. Because other people think that climate change, we don't have control on it. But I believe we have a big contribution to invest in climate change and to make sure that for the people not to be on the move like South Sudan, who have been on the move for the last 4 to 5 years, one thing we need to do is to rethink our position. Are we doing the right thing in the Paris Agreement? Are we all doing the right thing really? And who is behind? Who is not doing the right thing? Is it because of money? Because of capacity? So my appeal to you today is that South Sudan has been in the center of movement for the last 4 decades. One solution we have done in South Sudan is to establish what we call durable solutions for IDPs, refugees, and the host communities. Bring them together. They are very intelligent. They know what to do. They only don't have the resources to mitigate climate change. These people, they have the intelligence, they have the thinking, but only that they don't have the resources. Not necessarily money. Not necessarily money. We put money first because we fail to contribute to what we think we should do right. Otherwise, I thank you for your time, and I will be around for any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this brilliant opening. And the message is clear. Are we doing the right thing? And this is very, very strong question for all our panelists, because I have prepared a lot of different questions, but I think this is the main theme of today. Are we doing the right thing on this response to the people on the move? Now, thank you so much for sharing with us all the situations that are manifesting differently in different places. And I think this is a great segue for us to go into how experts look at this in different solutions that could be thought about. I'm honored to have these experts in this area who are at the forefront of this matter. And I'm going to start with Dr. Kanta Kumari Rigod, who is from the World Bank, and she is the lead climate change advisor on Regional Climate Change Coordinator. Dr. Kanta, I was thinking, can you highlight for us some of the data-driven models that could help identify and anticipate climate change migration and displacement hotspots, and how to guide us with proactive responses to this matter?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and a very good morning to all of you. I think we've heard some powerful statements on the context and on the realities from the country perspective, and the testimony from Sudan. So these are really powerful, and I think they all underscore one thing, that we really have to look forward and be proactive and anticipate the kind of movements that may happen in a distress-driven way. Movement in itself is not bad, but distress-driven movement can really be debilitating, as we've heard. And we know from the numbers that we hear that the scale is going to increase. So how can we look at this issue? And it was back in 2018 that the World Bank put out a report called Groundswell, Preparing for Internal Climate Migration, and followed by another report in 2021. And through these two series of reports, we applied, as you requested, as you mentioned, a data analysis and a global model-based approach to understand the issue at scale so that we can actually prepare and be proactive and anticipate. So what did we do? We knew that some things were set. Number one, we knew that climate change was getting worse. We knew that the kind of impacts that climate change was unfolding in terms of water stress, in terms of drops in crop productivity, in terms of sea level and the compounding impacts of storm surge were clearly articulated by the scientists. We also know that population in most parts of the world was increasing, and in some cases even doubling. And we also knew that the global emissions pathways were on a certain trajectory, and while we have also the ambitious trajectory of containing those emissions. So what we did was really brought together the scientists, the demographers, the geographers, and the development practitioners to put together what we call a scenario-based approach using the best scientific data on climate impacts, climate emissions, and the geography to understand what could be A, the scale of climate migration, B, the trajectory between now and 2050 so that we can better prepare, and 3, where would this unfold? What are those hotspots of in-climate migration and out-climate migration? So what did the World Bank find in this report that we worked with so many collaborators on? We found that if we do nothing, by 2050, we could see as many as 216 million people moving as a consequence of slow onset climate change. This does not include the displacement that happens in response to extreme events and shocks, which I think amplifies those numbers in a much greater way. But what we also found is that if you looked at it and you did some things right, like number one, reduce the scale of emissions and move towards renewable energy options, would really reduce the kind of impacts that play out. And number two, if we do not do anything, it will be those higher numbers, but if we did the right thing, we could reduce those numbers by as much as 80%. But we know that things are not equal. What we found in the model, bringing together the scientific data and the scenario-based approach, was geographically, some places would be affected worse than others. So the numbers are that in sub-Saharan Africa, we could see as many as 85 million people moving by 2050 due to the slow onset if we did nothing. In contrast, you might say in the North Africa region, the numbers were 19 million. Now that sounds like a small number, but 19 million in North Africa represents 10% of the population in 2050. And so it's about, putting those numbers in perspective. But more importantly, I think the geographic areas of where those emerging hotspots would happen is extremely important if we want to avert, minimize, and reduce the distress-driven migration. And I think here is where the spatial analysis that we were able to provide is really compelling, so that one can begin to plan and prepare for the kind of adaptation and the green, resilient, inclusive development. There are many ways in which we can do it. I think we need to, as I said, reduce the greenhouse, but bring in green, inclusive development at all stages of the mobility. Help people to adapt in place so they're not pushed out. Help them to move if they have to, if you're in a coastal locality and you must relocate, but do it in a planned and orderly manner. But even after people have moved, I think how we sort of bring about the social cohesion and productive aspects becomes really important. But more importantly, we need to look at this in a spatial and territorial way. And while the individual incidents and anecdotes are extremely important, the planning must take spatial and territorial approaches and draw in the economic opportunities of jobs and economic transitions. So I think these are all really important, and I think the country delegates have underscored some of these climate solutions, but I think we need to move from the reactive mode to the proactive mode, and I would argue even the anticipatory mode, because we begin to have to anticipate, because sadly we are locked into some of this, and the models tell us only part of the story. It's really important that we contextualize this in the context that has been mentioned so powerfully to relate it, because climate is potent, but so are the conflicts, and so are the development deficits that are sometimes in these localities. And we need to bring that together in an integrative way, working across the development community, the humanitarian communities, the peace communities, and really bring this agenda in the development context, but also domesticate some of the global policies and regional policies like the Kampala Convention, the Global Compact for Migration, but domesticate them so that they can become much more powerful alongside development interventions. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's fascinating that this displacement hotspots and distress is actually able to be seen, and scenario-based research and projection exist. That does help, I believe, the countries to really be anticipating on all these different crises that could actually come to their attention as fast as possible, so that we can have an integrated response all together, all of us. Thank you very much for that. Next, I am going to invite Ms. Michelle Yonitani, Senior Policy Advisor on Climate and Action, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. I'm going to ask you, because you were one of the first to publish a report on the nexus of climate change, displacement and conflict, and it's called the No Escape. Now, can you share with us a bit more about the key findings of this latest report that has such a strong message, and especially on the climate and displacement solutions for the forcibly displaced?
Thank you so much for the invitation to this really interesting discussion, and I feel truly humbled to follow such powerful opening remarks from the speakers from Somalia and from South Sudan. And this report that UNHCR has issued recently, which is very much a collaborative effort with around 13 expert organizations, researchers, is really trying to move our understanding of the problem in all of its complexity. I mean, I don't think that report does anything can't beat you in terms of eloquence, sir, in terms of what you described in terms of the situation of South Sudan. We've added into there some statistics. We've brought together different models which are out there already and so on, different sources of data to try and paint this picture, because after all, we really need to understand the problem in specific contexts if we are indeed to get to solutions which are effective, which are appropriate, and which include people who are truly on the front lines of the impacts of climate change. So indeed, who you are, where you are, and also the governance point, the power structures around you, the authorities who are willing or who are able, or the limitations on that willingness and ability to actually protect you, to assist you, to help to strengthen that resilience. These are absolutely critical to understand better. And that's why we put together this report looking at these multi-dimensional issues. The gentleman from South Sudan also raised, what is this causality? Is it climate? Is it conflict? Is it poverty? Inequity, marginalization? We would say in many contexts where communities are absolutely being left behind in terms of finance, in terms of policy, in terms of action on the ground. This is a daily reality, and UNHCR, with its presence in 135 countries worldwide, sees that every day on the ground, working alongside governments, in support to governments and our civil society and UN and other partners. It is indeed concerning that over the last decade, the number of people forcibly displaced by conflict and persecution has doubled to over 120 million people worldwide today. Also that over 70% of refugees and asylum seekers are coming from the most highly climate vulnerable countries in the world. And if that's where they're coming from, think about what that means for the potential for safe, sustainable, dignified return to those countries, which after all is the preference for most of these people. But other durable solutions, which may or may not be open to them, are also under increasing pressure under growing climate impacts. So we see these really complex patterns of movement, patterns of displacement, which none of the figures out there do justice to in terms of complexity. The increasing risk of protracted displacement, the reality that a very large number of people are living in displacement, not even just for years, but for decades, that new generations of children are growing up in displacement. This is the reality. That people living in displacement are recurrently being hit by climate shocks, by floods, by storms. That the high exposure to heat waves, to dangerous heat, which is really seriously threatening their health and their lives as they live in displacement, is growing. That 3 out of 4 of the forcibly displaced people today are living in countries where they already are facing high to extreme levels of exposure to climatic shocks and stresses. In countries like Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, DRC, Haiti, I can go on, right? And that by 2040, the number of those countries with that very high to extreme levels of exposure is going to increase based on our modeling with partners from 3 to 65 countries. So this is real. These are the best projections that we can make, the best and the worst. So on top of that, what we often hear is a kind of a separation also between disasters and conflict. But as we're hearing from these examples, we're not talking about separate situations. For communities being affected, for displaced people, for those hosting them, for the countries of origin, these are things which are absolutely colliding, are cascading, and creating quite a wicked problem that we really have to grasp. If I can come back to the governance issue with the focus here at the COP on the NDCs and the NAPs, right? So what we also observe is something really concerning, is that even though for so many countries displacement and distress in terms of movement is so commonplace, only a third of NAPs were, for example, reporting on even having consultations. That just 24 out of 60 of these NAPs actually contain concrete provisions addressing, minimizing displacement. That in terms of NDCs as well, there are only 25 out of 166 NDCs, last figures we're using, also include these concrete provisions addressing displacement. So there's a big policy and planning gap here in terms of climate action. Another point there also, I think, is in terms of coherence, because only 3 countries have concrete provisions addressing displacement in both their NDCs and their NAPs. Those 3 countries are Colombia, Timor-Leste, and Sri Lanka, as it goes, right? So there's a policy coherence issue there as well. And other gaps, which have been mentioned briefly in terms of transboundary effects, in terms of population movements, are also highly missing in this discussion. Only 8% of the NDCs actually considered cross-border displacement. So our calls to action, which you can find in this report, No Escape, really speak to that need to protect, include, invest and accelerate. Protect, including through the application of existing legal and policy tools and instruments to ensure that those persons are not left behind and that governments hosting them and communities hosting them are also supported in their endeavours. To include in the processes the voices, the capacities. In fact, the gentleman from South Sudan again said it so beautifully. I'm going to recite you if I may. They know what to do, they just don't have the resources, right? So indeed, we need to invest, we need that finance to invest, but also as a matter of justice, to build resilience, to make sure all the programming we're doing is climate smart. It's building in what the implications of climate change here are on top of everything else, and accelerating what needs to be done. And we're sitting here in the humanitarian hub, and I think humanitarians certainly know that it is not an excuse to say these situations are too difficult. Fragile and conflict-affected settings, it's too difficult to be done. We know things are happening. Communities themselves are often leading the way. Now we really need to scale up the support and make sure that it reaches them. So whether it's through the fund for responding to loss and damage, the discussions around adaptation funding, I think we all want to support here the advocacy, the commitments going into those funds to reach communities on the front lines. And thank you to Somalia. You mentioned the Global Refugee Forum. Also the implementation of the Global Compact for Refugees is very important. And your co-leadership along with Somalia, with Germany and Denmark is hugely important. This is a collaborative effort. All hands to the pump, right? So that leadership is really, really needed. Thank you so much. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. This is really brilliant to be told that we need to really integrate all our responses, whether it be in a development or whether it be humanitarian or peace. I think the problem here is that we actually had these between the cracks of all of these matters of development, of humanitarians, and we didn't get to this point where we can actually talk to this together and find out a way together. So protect, include, invest, accelerate. We would remember that. And this is a brilliant segue as well to share with us any more successful initiatives that demonstrate this. So I am going to Mr. Christoph Asicot, who is the Jordan country representative of Global Green Growth Initiative Institute, GGGI, to share with us some successful initiatives that you can show that demonstrate the impact of integrating climate and displacement solutions. And if you see, for instance, any innovative climate financing instrument that we could look at.
Is it better without? Yeah, I guess it's better without, yeah. Okay, so good morning, colleagues, distinguished guests. Also, thank you, UNDP, for the opportunity to share our experience. So, Jordan, as you know, is a kind of a small oasis of stability around countries that are in conflict. At the east of Jordan, we have Iraq, we have Syria in the north, Israel and Palestine in the west. So Jordan has already host of more than 1 million refugees so far. So we've been together with the government, together with the King of Jordan, trying to find some solutions. So today I would like to share or introduce a project that we've been implementing in Jordan for a year and a half, and that is starting to deliver results. It's about creating an inclusive green employment ecosystem. So by inclusive, I mean that there is a strong focus on women, refugees, and the youth. So we have a 50% refugee target for all our output on this project. So let me elaborate a little bit on what it consists of. We are trying to create an ecosystem so that these vulnerable groups, they can access green jobs, basically. So green jobs are at the nexus, I would say, of environment, climate change, and the green economy. So this is an opportunity for refugees to better integrate into their new country, I would say. This project has three components. The first component is really on the regulatory framework. We are helping the government to draft what we call the Green Employment Action Plan. So at the moment we are doing some projections to see where are the green jobs in Jordan at the moment, and where would the green job be in 5 years from now. So we have some projections and anticipate in the green job creation in different sectors based on the needs of the economy, on the NDCs as well, and in the economic modernization vision of the country. On the second component of this project, we are working on green skills training. So we have performed through surveying a green skills gap assessment, where we have interviewed around 1,000 job seekers, including refugees, 400 businesses, to see where are the gaps, basically, what are the needs from the businesses, what kind of green skills are already on the market for the job seekers, including refugees. We have already the results for that, and we have decided to go into first delivering 3 types of skills. Sorry, I'm just... One is around, so again, it's based on the Jordan context, might not be applicable to, for example, the example of South Sudan or Somalia, but for Jordan, we have decided to deliver green skills in terms of solar panel installation and maintenance, heat pump installation and maintenance as well. And because there is a high uptake of electric vehicles in Jordan, we are also delivering skills training around EV maintenance for cars and for also buses, EV buses. So for that, we are partnering with a local university. And also we found that there was also a basic lack of environmental awareness among job seekers. So we are also delivering more soft skills around environmental awareness for job seekers. So this is the second component. The last component, the third component, is around green entrepreneurship. So not only we are looking at job seekers, but we are also looking at green entrepreneurs. This third component has 3 steps. So first, we are targeting 660 let's say participants, people who have an idea that are not yet mature, on a basic green entrepreneurship skills training. From these 660, we will select 200 that will go into a green incubator. So here we are also we're partnering with local NGOs, and we are working at governorate level. So we are in the process right now in recruiting these participants. And the third step is for only 20 selected, let's say, more mature startup, where we will be providing a grant of, let's say, what we call a seed grant for their own business to support them through the development of their business. So, and as a final component, all in all, we are collating everything that we have developed, including on the component 1, on the research, the projection, including component 2, on the green skills gap between the business and the job seekers, and all the training materials that we have developed under this third component and second component. We are partnering with the Ministry of Digital Entrepreneurship and Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship, sorry. And we will include all our findings into the existing web platform called Startup Jordan, which will be again accessible to job seekers. So yeah, if more information is on our website, so if you're interested, please feel free. But this is something we are also aiming to scale up and replicate in other triple GI countries such as Burkina Faso. And very briefly on your next question about the innovative financing, I would like to also introduce an initiative that we are launching. We've just launched 2 days ago at the COP. It's called Carbon Transaction Facility, where we will be supporting, GGI will be supporting different member countries for setting up the necessary regulatory framework around trading around the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and also help countries to trade with donor countries that are contributing to this carbon transaction facility. I'm linking that with refugees, migration, and entrepreneurship, because if we can have more refugee population starting their own businesses around mitigation, adaptation to climate change, then if perhaps not at a single entrepreneur level, but if we aggregate these entrepreneurs, we can come up with decent volumes of carbon emission reduce, and that can be also an opportunity to provide climate and carbon finance to these green entrepreneurs from vulnerable groups like women, refugees, and the youth. So thank you very much. I'll stop here, but if you have further questions, I'll be happy to also elaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this really is an interesting, concrete examples of how we can actually work together, because these are areas I think all of us have common thread of interested in investing in not only decarbonization, but also the response and adaptation measures. Thank you also for sharing us about the Article 6 related carbon transaction facility, which is a very interesting initiative, and we would love to know more about it as UNDP as well. So thank you very much. Now, last but not least, from International Federation Red Cross, we have Mr. Jonathan Stone, who is the manager for climate, environment and resilience. I am going to ask you the very final last question so that we can also wrap up through this, I guess. To share with us any practical examples and lessons learned from your examples in your initiatives aimed at building resilience in climate vulnerable communities.
Thanks so much. And I realize we're about 4 minutes over time. So rather than speak, I'm going to do something a little bit different. There's a few people in the room who I think you should all speak to after this event has finished. I know you're all very busy people and probably need to go on your way. So point number one, if you want to understand a little bit of the governance challenges around these issues and these interventions, Liz at the back of the room, would you put your hand in the air? Liz works the Special Envoy for Horn of Africa's office. Go talk to Liz, some of the governance challenges. Okay, if you want to hear a little bit about how to do programming across different contexts, the Climate Security Mechanism by UNDP is fantastic. Do talk to Eri afterwards. If you want to hear about interventions that really actually work, genuinely work on the ground, particularly in Somalia, which has been fantastic examples. Speak to Chris afterwards. Chris, you can put your hand up. And then finally, the Red Cross Red Crescent movement is doing some brilliant work through nature-based solutions in small and developing states. We don't have our person from a kind of a more fragile context, but if you speak to Audrey just here, who will put her hand up after the event, go talk to her. Don't hear from me, hear from them, talk to each other.
Thank you very much for this brilliant wrap-up that I couldn't even dream of. So thank you so much. And I do acknowledge that IFRC is there everywhere where we work in. And we are really partners in this and partners in crime in this. And we would love to keep working with all of you together for an integrated response for this matter that we all have in common. Thank you very much for a brilliant panel today.